Have you ever tried eating a meal without salt? That flat, lifeless taste leaves a memory sharper than a dozen flavorful dishes. Salt may look like a simple white crystal, but it is far more than seasoning. Across millennia, salt has been currency, a strategic weapon, and today a foundation of global industries worth hundreds of billions of dollars. From the markets of ancient Rome, where soldiers were sometimes paid in salt rations, the root of the word salary, to the industrial economies of the 21st century, salt has remained indispensable. It shapes not only flavor, but preservation, health, chemistry, and technology. Today, the world produces over 100 million tons of salt every year, with China, the United States, and India leading the charge. Roughly 60% of this comes from seawater, harvested through evaporation and refined into the pure white crystals we find on our tables. But salt doesn't stop at food. It's a critical input in pharmaceuticals, textiles, glass-making, paper production, batteries, and even road safety during winter. Without it, entire sectors of modern life would collapse. So how do we transform ordinary seawater into this powerful mineral resource? Let's journey from the glittering salt flats of coastal Asia to the high-tech refining plants of the West, uncovering the science and tradition behind salt, the white gold of human civilization. The story of sea salt begins with something deceptively simple: seawater. Oceans carry about 35 grams of dissolved salt per liter, a mixture of sodium chloride, magnesium, calcium, and trace minerals. To isolate sodium chloride, we rely on the oldest partnership known to humankind: sunlight and wind. In coastal regions with dry, sunny climates, such as China's Bohai Bay, India's Gujarat coast, or the Mediterranean, shallow ponds are carved into the earth. These ponds, lined with clay or cement to prevent seepage, form a vast geometric landscape, visible even from satellites. Here the seawater is guided step by step. First into settling ponds where sand and plankton sink, then into concentration ponds where evaporation pushes salinity from 3% up toward 25%, finally into crystallization beds where the brine reaches saturation. At this point, something magical happens. Within a few days, sodium chloride begins to precipitate, forming crystalline sheets across the pond floor. Sunlight, wind, and time weave their slow alchemy, turning liquid ocean into harvestable salt. Every December, when the air turns dry and rainfall subsides, coastal farmers prepare their fields for this transformation. Dikes are reinforced, pond floors compacted, and canals cleared. Timing is everything. If seawater is taken in at the wrong tide, impurities will disrupt crystallization, ruining the harvest. What emerges, however, is not a scatter of grains, but wide flakes and layers that can be lifted, raked, and piled into brilliant white mounds. When the shimmering salt sheets begin to harden across the crystallization beds, the harvest season begins. This is the moment farmers have waited for after weeks of careful monitoring of tides, sunlight, and wind. In many coastal villages, harvesting remains a traditional affair. Workers step onto the brilliant white flats armed with simple tools, wooden rakes, bamboo poles, and metal shovels. With the sun blazing overhead, they push and scrape the salt into neat rows, then gather it into conical piles that glisten like frozen pyramids under the sky. The process may look simple, but it is punishing work. The reflective salt surface magnifies the sun's rays, often making the heat unbearable. Skin burns, eyes sting, and yet the farmers endure because salt is their lifeline. Each mound represents weeks of patience, precision, and sweat. From here, the salt is loaded onto handcarts or small trucks and carried to storage sheds. At this stage, the salt is coarse, slightly damp, and full of natural minerals. For many households, this raw salt is already good enough for cooking, preserving fish, or curing meats. But in the modern global economy, demand requires far greater efficiency. That is where technology steps in. Across the world's largest salt flats, from the United States to Australia, mechanized harvesters now dominate. These self-propelled machines glide across the beds with rotating blades scraping up salt crystals and feeding them onto conveyor belts. The salt is lifted, separated, and stored in onboard tanks, capable of holding several tons at once. What used to take dozens of workers' days to accomplish, machines can now complete in hours. Instead of manual labor under harsh sunlight, operators steer harvesters from shaded cabins equipped with GPS systems and real-time salinity sensors. Still, many communities cling proudly to tradition. For them, salt harvesting is more than an industry. It is a cultural identity passed from one generation to the next. And in regions where artisanal sea salt commands premium prices, the human touch remains irreplaceable. Once the salt is harvested and piled into storage sheds, its journey is far from complete. What lies ahead is an equally fascinating process of refinement, where raw, coarse salt is transformed into the gleaming crystals we sprinkle on our food or use in industry. At the entrance of a processing plant, trucks unload their precious cargo into massive hoppers. From there, conveyor belts carry the salt through a series of stages designed to clean, purify, and standardize the product. The first stop is washing. Here, powerful jets of fresh water rinse away dust, clay shells, and microscopic organisms. Some facilities employ vibrating screens or centrifugal separators to ensure that even the tiniest impurities are removed. But washing alone is not enough. To meet the high standards of today's global market, the salt must be dissolved into brine and then recrystallized under controlled conditions. This is where science takes over from nature. In large dissolving tanks, raw salt is mixed with hot water until it reaches a saturated solution. By filtering out insoluble particles like calcium and magnesium, the brine becomes pure. Then comes vacuum crystallization. Inside tall steel chambers, pressure is lowered, causing water to evaporate at reduced temperatures. Slowly, new salt crystals form fine, uniform, and bright white. These crystals are then spun in high-speed centrifuges to remove excess moisture before being dried in fluidized bed dryers or continuous belt dryers. The result: perfectly dry salt with consistent texture ready for packaging. Depending on its destination, the salt is ground to different grades. Fine grains for the table, medium crystals for baking or curing meat, coarse chunks for pickling or gourmet presentation, and industrial salt, which skips some refinements for use in chemical plants, de-icing, or water treatment. Every batch undergoes strict quality checks. Moisture content, purity, iodine levels, and microbial safety are all tested to meet national and international standards. Products that pass are sent to automated packaging lines, where robotic arms fill seal and label bags ranging from tiny household packs to 50-kilogram sacks destined for factories. What happens to all the wastewater from these operations? In modern plants, nothing is wasted. Advanced treatment systems recycle wash water for reuse in cooling or cleaning, reducing environmental impact and cutting costs. In this way, salt production not only sustains human life, but also reflects the growing emphasis on sustainability in industry. When most people think of salt, they imagine it sprinkled on their food. But in reality, the story of salt stretches far beyond the kitchen. It is a mineral woven into medicine industry culture and even geopolitics. Salt has been a healer for thousands of years. Ancient Egyptians used it in mummification, recognizing its preservative power. In traditional Chinese medicine, salt baths were prescribed for circulation and healing. Even today, saline solutions are vital in hospitals worldwide, used in IV drips, wound cleaning, and rehydration therapies. Without salt, modern medicine could not function. Industry, too, depends heavily on this mineral. More than half of all salt produced globally doesn't go to food at all, but instead fuels massive chemical processes. Sodium chloride is the foundation for making chlorine caustic soda plastics like PVC, paper textiles, and detergents. In colder countries, millions of tons are spread across icy highways every winter, reducing accidents and keeping supply chains alive. In energy, salt is also entering the future. Researchers are developing sodium-ion batteries as a cheaper, more sustainable alternative to lithium-ion technology. Large underground salt caverns already serve as storage chambers for natural gas and hydrogen, stabilizing power grids across Europe and North America. In this way, the same mineral that flavored ancient stews is now helping to power the next generation of clean energy. Culturally, salt has always carried symbolic weight. The word salary itself comes from salarium, the allowance Roman soldiers received to buy salt. To be worth your salt meant to prove your value. In Japan, salt is scattered on sumo wrestling rings for purification. In some African and Middle Eastern traditions, sharing salt with a guest seals bonds of trust and hospitality. Through history, wars have been fought over salt, empires taxed it, and religions sanctified it. It is one of the very few minerals that all of humanity has relied on continuously for survival, trade, and meaning. Behind every shining crystal of salt are the people who devote their lives to harvesting it. For coastal farmers, the work is grueling. Under the blazing sun, surrounded by reflective white flats, temperatures can feel twice as intense. The physical strain of scraping, piling, and transporting salt is immense, while the income is often unstable, tied to unpredictable weather and market swings. Yet salt farming remains a cultural identity for many coastal communities. Families pass down techniques through generations, blending tradition with small adaptations of modern tools. For them, salt is more than a livelihood. It is heritage, pride, and survival. Looking ahead, technology is beginning to ease their burden. Self-propelled harvesters, solar-powered pumps, and automated brine monitors promise safer, more efficient harvests. At the same time, growing global awareness of sustainable production is pushing governments and industries to support eco-friendly methods and fairer wages. The white gold of the sea will continue to shine, not only because of its value to economies and